Some Republican lawmakers are calling on controversial Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore to step aside if what we're learning about accusations of sexual misconduct with the teenagers are true. Candidate calls the Washington Post report a political smear and vows that he will fight. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida. He's on the Armed Services, Judiciary, and Budget Committees. Good to have you, sir.
Good to be on, Chris, and happy Veterans Day and Veterans Day weekend to all of our veterans and military families.
Yes, tomorrow a very important day. We had the VA Secretary on, Shulkin, to talk about efforts like the hashtag Be There campaign to help with suicidal ideation, reaching out to people. Very important. People should remember the sacrifice of our service members. So thank you for being with us and making that known. What is your take on the accusations against the nominee in Alabama, Roy Moore? Do you think he should step down?
Well, I agree with my colleague Mark Meadows, who said that if these allegations are true, Roy Moore has no place in the Senate and no place in the Republican Party. I do think the timing is a bit curious. Roy Moore has run statewide 3 times. He's won twice. And Lord knows Mitch McConnell put millions of dollars into opposition research against Roy Moore. And we're just learning these things now when potentially the Democrats have a great deal to gain. But I absolutely agree that if the allegations are true, they are hideous, they are disgusting, and Roy Moore should step aside and, frankly, shouldn't be free walking among us.
All right, well, you know, legal implications, you know, that gets very tricky under Alabama state law, what age it was, what the statute of limitations. But let's take it step by step with what you said. Allegations are suggestions without proof, right? These are accusations from 4 named women, Trump voters, by the way, to the extent that that's relevant because of the politicization of this, and 30 corroborated sources. So they're not just allegations, they're accusations. Does that change your reckoning?
Well, when you've got the weight of evidence that you're starting to see build, I think it's very important to take the time to evaluate the veracity, to evaluate the credibility, and certainly as more and more information comes out, it's more and more troubling, Chris.
But it's going to be hard to do that, right? It's certainly before the election. And then the election happens, if the judge wins, really hard to remove him from the Senate. Puts you in a little bit of a political pickle, does it not?
Well, I believe the Senate has the authority to define its own membership, and so it could potentially expel Judge Moore if it was to be found that he, in fact, did these things. Again, if we find out that these things actually happened, he absolutely has no place in the Senate or our party, and I think we're going to be learning more. We may learn more about the credibility of these folks. We may learn more about their stories, their details, and it's just very sad when you see this enter the political sphere. You and your guests were discussing earlier that this is not a court of law where there really is a presumption of innocence. This is the court of public opinion. It's politics, and there are different rules.
You know, the timing you brought up also, it's not unusual for bombshells to come out as you near election date. Reporting takes time, pressure builds, relevance builds. They had 30 corroborating sources here. That doesn't happen overnight. Why the suspicion?
Well, Roy Moore has faced other election days, Chris. You're absolutely right that when an election comes around, you typically see these allegations come out, but Roy Moore just had a pretty significant election against Luther Strange. We didn't learn these things then. We also didn't learn them in any of the other 3 statewide campaigns that Judge Moore was involved in, and so I think that we've got to just take that into account for context. That doesn't mean we shouldn't believe these women. It doesn't mean they're not telling the truth. It doesn't mean that Judge Moore didn't commit the offenses that he's been accused of. It's just important for context and evaluating things.
Women don't want to come forward either, and one of the reasons they don't want to come forward is because their veracity is questioned when they do. Now, do false accusations exist? Yes, but they are very, very rare. If you look at it statistically,
well, Chris,
it is highly unlikely.
We can't live in a world where the accusation is the conviction, though, right? Like, you would agree, look, your brother was an attorney general. An accusation cannot itself be a conviction.
Absolutely, certainly.
Right, the weight of evidence here is deeply troubling.
Certainly. But you also have to measure how the judge responds to it and what it means. You know, these are difficult questions that you guys will have to deal with.